Alkaloids are naturally occurring amines, and they have this name because they are basic, but as we discussed in the previous lecture for amines in general, amines are not as basic as hydroxide, which is the term that's given for things that are alkaline. So alkaloid is sort of kind of basic. So what I hope to do in this lesson is just give you a few examples of some important alkaloids, both ones that are found in the body and ones that are found in nature in other sources. So the first example that I want to look at are the molecules adrenaline, also known as epinephrine, and noradrenaline, also known as norepinephrine. Okay, so these are hormones, and they are actually secreted by what are called the adrenal glands, which are these glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And they are released into the bloodstream to start what's known as the fight or flight response, when an animal or human is under stress. So you get things like increased blood pressure, strengthening of the heart rate, and widening of the blood passages. Norepinephrine also causes an increase in blood pressure, but it is most directly involved in transmission of nerve impulses. So other alkaloids include neurotransmitters, which are small molecules that are released by one nerve cell and cross the synapse to send a message from one nerve cell into another nerve cell. So dopamine, and these are not terribly complex structures here. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is in the brain, and there are many, many drugs now that are designed to treat dopamine imbalances. So they may be dopamine reuptake inhibitors, for example. So many antipsychotic drugs deal with dopamine levels. So abnormalities in dopamine levels are attributed to psychoses, Parkinson's disease, and all kinds of other neurological processes. Serotonin is another neurotransmitter. Okay, so this one has an indole fragment. Okay, so remember indole from last lesson. So it's also a neurotransmitter that are released by neurons in the brain, and it is responsible, people call this the happiness neurotransmitter, right? So a number of the antidepressants, including Prozac, are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So they stop serotonin from being taken back up into the presynaptic neuron. So proper serotonin levels are important for maintaining your stable mental state, and schizophrenia, for example, as well as depression, may be connected to abnormalities in serotonin metabolism. Okay. Another alkaloid that is fairly ubiquitous in the body is histamine. So this also has the imidazole fragment that we looked at in the last lesson. So histamine is actually bound to proteins nearly all over the place in the body, but its release causes, well, first of all, its release causes symptoms associated with allergic reactions and the common cold, because histamine can bind to what are called histamine receptors, and that starts the allergic response. But histamine is also involved in the secretion of excess stomach acid. So some histamine receptor antagonists are actually used as prescription antacid drugs. So this is the generation of drugs such as Tagamet, Pepcid, and Zantac. Okay, so getting on to the topic of drugs, there are some amines, some alkaloids that are actually administered as drugs. So you've probably heard of morphine and codeine. They are opioid drugs. They have this very, very, very complex structure with lots of different rings here. And they, of course, are famous painkillers. And there are receptors in the body called the opioid receptors that they do directly bind to. So another example of something that is widely abused as a drug, so moving a little bit more to the dark side of amines now, is methamphetamine. And again, the meth is just the methyl group on here. Amphetamine itself is without the methyl group on it. Amphetamine is a stimulant. It is given by prescription as a treatment for ADHD. And all of these amphetamine type drugs do increase alertness and energy. Unfortunately, they are habit forming. They have a high potential for abuse, and they are very, very addictive, which is what makes them dangerous. Another such drug that is habit forming is nicotine. Okay, so that's actually a toxic alkaloid that is found in tobacco. Its structure is actually a little more complex than most of what we have seen so far, but it is actually the presence of nicotine that makes smoking habit forming. So, nothing very challenging about this. I just wanted to give you a sense of what some of these alkaloids are. There are many, many, many more alkaloids, especially ones that are isolated from plant sources that have various medicinal properties. But these are ones that you've probably heard of and are either in your body or are used extensively as both licit and illicit drugs. So in the next lesson, we will move forward and talk a little bit about some of the ways that you can actually synthesize amines.